Hey, good evening, Meeps. Sorry that we're 7 minutes late, but hey, we're here. All the tech came together, and we're really excited tonight. So let's get this show started. We're 7 minutes late. All right, so here we are. One live guest has tuned in already. Hi, welcome. Say something in the comments so that we can say your name live on stream. Sen, what awesome people do we have with us tonight?
Oh, well, we have not only the typical awesomeness of Erica, but we have Brian Lenz from the Michigan area. He's the organizer, is that the right word? Part of the ConCom?
Founder, organizer, chief broom pusher, yes, all that for GrandCon.
All the above for GrandCon. And we have Mike Eckert with us, who just announced his hostile takeover. No, I'm just kidding. It's not a hostile takeover. Of Kublacon, which is in the California area, about an hour away from where Jesse is. So we've got a bunch of people here with us who are experienced con runners for various things. And we're going to talk about, I guess, the trials and tribulations of running a con, the successes and the glory of it all, and then also talk about it from a design perspective and what designers should do in order to get the most out of their con experience.
And shouldn't.
And shouldn't do, right? So let's get it started. Mike, can you introduce yourself? Let us know who you are.
Sure. My name is Mike Eckert, and I'm the executive producer of Kublacon in San Francisco, California. I've been doing this now. This is our 18th year, and I ran conventions before that. Probably since 1993, I've been actively involved in conventions in some form or fashion.
Okay, which ones?
So in college, I started, or I should say restarted, Spartacon at San Jose State, the Spartans being their mascot. I went to school there for my junior and senior year. I immediately wanted to find out if they had a gaming club, and they did. It was called the Fantasy and Strategy Club. I went there, saw how dysfunctional it was, and but attended well, but just dysfunctional. And I said, well, who's in charge? And they kind of said, well, some of us are and some of us aren't. And I said, well, I want to be in charge. So they all took a vote on the spot, and I became the overlord that evening, which is what they call that person. And so with that, I took control of the club, and they told me about this cool convention that they ran. And I thought that would be an awesome idea to get some money for the club. I went to the student accounting and saw we had $3.22 in our student account. And thought, wow, I don't think I can actually get a con going with that kind of a shoestring budget. So I went to the ASB, borrowed some money, and we ran that con for 2 years in a row. And we had sponsorship, because this is back during the Magic heyday. We actually had WotC come down and ran the tournament. We had about 260 people for both Saturday and Sunday. And at the end of the day, we had $7,000 in that account. So we did really well. And then after that, I had about a year off or so just attending conventions, and then I happened into another one called GameCon in Oakland, California. The owner, Nick, and his wife had to move to Texas for his job, and they didn't want the community to lose their awesome Memorial Day weekend convention, so he handed me and about two other guys and gals the con keys, and we took it from there. And basically ran it for the next 3 years until we actually merged with Manifest to form Kublacon in 2001.
Oh, so that's kind of how it all came together.
Yep. Manifest started in '94 by Japji Khalsa and Anthony Gallela. And then I ran GameCon with a couple other folks. And when we merged, the other guys didn't stay on very long. But I stayed on this whole time. And now it's kind of like come full circle in a way. I'm really proud of the team that we have at Kubla. It's a fantastic, fun time. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the future brings for us.
Excellent. So, Brian, tell us about yourself. What is GrandCon all about? And how did you find it?
So, with myself, at one particular time, I was steeped heavily into the wonderful corporate world, or one of many factions of the corporate world, and said, hey, I have a passion. I have a passion for gaming. I've always had that passion, and it was about 7.5 years ago that I decided to start up a game group, which was West Michigan Tabletop Gamers, and that group has grown to nearly 1,300 members as of today. But out of that, really, that was the catalyst for, hey, where do I want to take this? Where do I want to utilize, my skills, my knowledge that I've acquired over the years, and bring that passion into fun and excitement for others, introducing them into the hobby industry, creating a family-friendly environment. And that was really where, the catalyst from West Michigan Tabletop blossomed into GrandCon almost 7 years ago. And it has been an exciting experience, held in Grand Rapids, Michigan, every September. It is really taken off in a fun fashion way. So really into the community here, getting well entrenched. Downtown, I moved the convention just recently in the past year. This was my second year being downtown Grand Rapids. Beautiful location. I know Erica had the opportunity to visit recently, so that was awesome. And Sen, you've been in the past, but it's at a new location, so I look forward to seeing you in the future.
I was there too,
and I was getting around to that. So, and Mike was actually able to venture this way from California this year.
It was fantastic.
So we had a really good time. So that's where it comes from, just a passion I had and the experience in the business area that I decided to put those two together and create an exciting family friendly event. And I'm still young. I'm not as old as Mike is in the convention world, but I've been around for 7 years and 25 years, 18 years, correct, with Kubla. Isn't it about 25 though? Is 90 something?
Yeah, so 18 with Kubla, and before that, Manifest was since 94, but I only attended that show. I didn't run that one.
Right.
Yeah, it's been about 25 years worth of show running for me.
So between the two of us, we have well over 30 years of convention experience. So, but I've as far as I've been able to get around to Gen Con as well and help out at BGG, and I've been to all the PAXs, and so I've taken all that experience as well, besides my personal background, and just the passion of gaming, and planted a nice seed here in Grand Rapids, and it's a great spot to visit. So it's just been an amazing ride.
Excellent.
So I have a quick question, because I think it'll put a lot of what your answers into context. I'm really curious kind of what the demographics of your con are, and maybe kind of if you've seen that changing, because I think it'll kind of affect how we see some of your answers. Let's start with Mike.
All right, so are you talking about demographics of different types of games or actual people?
I'm talking about attendees, because I have to think that kind of influences what your programming end up being. So I'm curious what that traditionally has looked like, maybe if that looks like it's changing, because I have a feeling when we get kind of into some of the more specific questions, it'll make kind of sense for someone who's maybe even thinking about that same kind of con, maybe if they want to start one.
Yeah. So, going back even before Kublacon, gaming was primarily, a guy's thing. There weren't a lot of women that if you looked across the room, you wouldn't see very many. So it wasn't too terribly diverse. And when we started Kublacon, we had a pretty diverse staff, almost equal men to women. That was there's only 17 or 18 of us at the time. Now we're over 70. And the big push for us, and something that was terribly important to us, was women gaming and kids and youth in gaming. And one of the ladies who was one of the original staff members created our kids program, and it started pretty small and humble, and now she boasts over 180 kids and teens in that program at any one time. If you go walk into her room, and they've taken over an entire quadrant of the hotel space. I believe it's about 6,500 square feet. It's all hers, and she runs kids programming in there. So we've seen a huge uptick in the last decade of kids playing. And as far as women in gaming, now it's amazing at how diverse and how cross-sectional it is across all the different genres. I guess a lot of them are in board games, but even role-playing games now have a large preponderance of women. And not just with D&D, they're playing all kinds of things: Call of Cthulhu, Delta Green, all these other non-D&D games, which I think is fantastic for good role-playing. Of course, LARPs has always had a contingent of women in that game, especially with the vampire LARPs that we have on Saturday and Sunday night, the huge ones, the 100-plus people playing those. But yeah, over the last, I think, decade, you'd see a real mixing of different cultures, different genders, and it's really kind of pleasant. Now, of course, being in the Bay Area, it's kind of a little easier to have that cross-section across all these different people. But even in visiting Grand Rapids, I saw, just downtown, saw people, of all shapes and sizes, which I thought was fantastic. But I'll let Brian speak to the specifics about his show.
Brian.
Yes. Yeah. So as far as the demographics, I've always been focused on bringing in community, and to me, community is anybody and everybody. It's very open, very diverse. Kind of my personal feeling is that open arms, loves and hugs, as much as you can. But and gaming is all about being with each other and communicating with each other and learning about new people, hanging out with old friends and making new friends alike. And so with that, what better way to establish by, just open arms to the whole community. So I've done things like reached out to Scouts of America, worked with local, charitable organizations that work, like Make-A-Wish Foundation and Extra Life, bringing in more families with their kids. My attendance increase for kids has been astronomical just in the past 2 years. So by seeing that speaks volumes that there is a change in the way people are looking at our hobby industry. Also, they're becoming more open and able to step out a little bit more, I think, with what we've seen over the past couple decades with the wonderful electronic age. So with that being said, the demographics, it sounds very similar to what Mike is explaining. I haven't had an opportunity to get out to Kublacon that hope to rectify that very soon. But at the same token, from what I've seen, it's an amazing experience to see that type of community involvement and growth. So, with the kids being there, that puts a huge smile on my face and in my heart, to see the kids having a good time and with their families, especially when you're seeing children that are under the ages of 9 and under, which is what I take in for free. Kids can come to my show and be allowed in for, as long as they have a badge, all that jazz. But that's just been growing astronomically year over year. So that's what it's all about. It's kind of an unspoken family, if you will, and that's the way I look at it.
I think, like all families, you have to kind of have procreation. So to foster the kids is super important. In fact, we're going to be launching our website for ticket sales here in a couple of days, and I was figuring out how to segregate the kid pricing from the adult pricing in its own category, and I decided to name the category the future gamers of Kublacon. That's the category for the kids. So it just speaks to the importance for our industry of game conventions to make sure that children of gamers, or even just kids who have parents who take them who have nothing to do with gaming, are fostered and comfortable to learn games. And to what Brian said, being able to sit across the table from somebody, for me, is much more rewarding than across the internet. in terms of like video games versus board games things. I think that that's much better, and if kids have such a challenge these days with social media and things the way they are now versus when I was a kid, that these opportunities at game conventions are just paramount to their development.
Very good points. Very good points. Jess, go ahead.
Are we jumping into the question, Jesse? Okay.
Yeah, I was, and then Sen started talking, and then I was just like not talking because that's what I do.
That's right.
And dancing.
Yeah, I'm dancing. Yeah, so we got a couple of questions came up in the audience chat while you guys were expanding on Erica's question about demographics. So Zach Connolly was wondering what the turnout was for the first con you ran and what methods you used to expand upon it in subsequent years. So Brian, did you want to take this one first?
Sure. So it's all been grassroots for me. It has been just pounding the pavement, nonstop, talk about it, promoting, the show from a promotional standpoint, but just letting folks know that, hey, I'm, putting together something fun and exciting, right? When I started 7 years ago, for myself, there weren't as many shows as there are now. So that's a thing we're seeing, right? And so it was nice to actually have an opportunity to kind of set a month. Now now you have to look 25 miles around to see if you're overlapping with folks because of demographics. But so when I first started, I had an amazing first year. I had an opportunity to reach out to, and some folks may or may not know, but I had an opportunity to reach out to Tracy and Laura Hickman. Tracy Hickman's a well-renowned author in the sci-fi fantasy realm, written over 200 books, New York Times bestseller. His wife, Laura, I established communication with them. They committed to come. I got Ed Greenwood to come my first year, Jeff Grubb, and then the list went on, from there. And that was my first year, right? So that attracted several folks just because of their past, their talents that were brought to the table besides amongst the others. And it was just an amazing year. It was very intimate. It was at a small college campus, like a hotel convention center. And, we pushed the envelope, 1,100, 1,200 people, 1,300 people my first year. And that was just, pounding the ground and letting people know, hey, we're starting something new and exciting in this area. And it was, and like I said before, no small favor to West Michigan tabletop gamers. That was a nice catalyst because I was able to plug into that locally and just say, hey, game group, this is going to happen. And folks turned out. So it was an amazing first year. And ever since then, it's just been, the wonderful incremental growth that you'd want to see. And I don't see it stopping.
Yeah. Awesome. For you want me to answer that also, or?
You should.
Yeah. I can answer that. Just I'll make it brief. It's very similar to what Brian's talking about, and I'll only go as far back as the beginning of Kubla. Right before the merger, Manifest was, because you can tell by the name, was super duper heavy into Magic the Gathering, and that started with grassroots too, because you had a bunch of Game Center was one place where you could just go play card games there. There were some game stores that had events. And because they were so all over the place, that's why Chopchi and Anthony decided to create one space where they could have huge tournaments. But it was very much one type of game, then they expanded a little bit, and at the same time, GameCon had all the other kind of events. They didn't have a lot of CCGs, they didn't have a lot of board games, they had role-playing and heavy on the historical miniatures. So for us, at 300 to 500 attendees each, we were able to grow simply by merging and bringing both of our game sets together into one place on the Memorial Day weekend, which was a big draw here for gaming. All the major holidays here have a big game convention on them. And so that artificially, just by merging, made us have 1,100 attendees our first year in 2001.
There's a nice idea of pulling all these different communities together to create your audience. So it sounds like you kind of have to start with something very local and hopefully have that support. and then you can build it from there. And as Brian says, hopefully you find things that will attract people to you, like named designers.
Yep, exactly. Erica?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I don't think I count.
That's why
I don't count.
I was at GrandCon along with other folks.
I don't think that counts.
Oh, it counts. It counts.
Everything makes a difference.
It does. It's exciting. It's an amazing experience to bring the talent and the community together and just watch that bubble to the surface with excitement. So it's been super cool experience, and I don't want to see it stop.
Cool. We have another question from Stefan Brunel. Stefan works with a bunch of publishers, and he wanted to know, what's your expectation as a con when you deal with a publisher? What do you hope they do to help you? So what are publishers adding to the mix, and how do you help publishers get to your shows? We'll start with Mike on this one. What do you think, Mike?
That's an excellent question. Thank you. For us, we really want to have more publishers at our show for lots of reasons. And one of our goals for next year is to bring in more publishers because we feel the attendees really appreciate that that one-on-one interaction they can have with publishers, especially if the publisher brings a couple of their design talent with them. And then these people get to talk face-to-face with these designers that they either admire or they've heard about because they're pushing the next big Kickstarter. They can run demos for us. We love seeing that. We love seeing releases. If they can release stuff at our show, like everybody wants to release at Gen Con. Not everybody can, and not everybody is going to wait until August to release their games, so they'll release throughout the year. So we try to get them to time releases, which I've actually worked out for next year with Colossal and Meeple. They're going to release a couple of games at Kublacon, which is fantastic, and that's what we expect from a publisher, because those types of events will bring in people, if for no other reason than they're the first ones to get a copy of that game, which for us is just phenomenal and fantastic. So, and then they talk about it, on their websites. That's social media is king when it comes to getting the word out that they're going to be at a particular convention.
And Brian, what about you?
From my standpoint, I share very similar parallel thoughts as Mike. I do have some other things with the publishers as well. Like Mike said, bringing in a designer to marry up with the publisher. That's actually something I've worked on the past couple of years, is that if I see a publisher coming in, I will see if I can get one of my designer friends out in the field, if they can come in at the same time, because then it ties them together, gives them the opportunity to talk with the publisher at the show. So the expectation is that the publisher works with the designer in some form or fashion. This year was, as I'm growing, there's certain segments that I can actually fulfill. And as Erica knows, unfortunately, fell a little sick during the show, but it happens. But I will.
My voice.
I know. But it's like, hey, Erica came in. I wanted, I said, hey, can you run, Bosk, Roar, things that are current, things that are fresh. Floodgate Games was there. IDW wasn't able to make it, but they were a huge support on the back end. Thank you, Ross Thompson, from IDW. But at the same token, that's the kind of relationship that I look for between a publisher and the designers, and because we're here as an industry folk to bolster that, to help boost the hobby and draw on the community on that. We all know that having that kind of fun and excitement, we hope that equivalates to sales, right? We get that. That's the back end. But at the same time, there's more to it from that relationship, is being excited, being present, being engaging and active all the way around. And so that's what I would expect out of a publisher. Too many times over my career in other industries and this industry, when somebody sits back and doesn't engage, doesn't show any effort, is just kind of there, and then says, hey, what happened? And so that, I expect a publisher to be engaging. So that's what I would have to say to that.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Erica, do you have any more questions from your little list of stuff?
I have quite the list. So actually I'm curious because I think a lot of people when they tune in to listen at cons is because there's some part of them that says, my community needs one too. How do I do this? So I've got a bunch of questions that might kind of lead down to like, how do you actually go about organizing something at this level? Obviously, starting small and working right up, you don't want to overdo it. But let's start off with simple things like you need people, not just we talked about demographics and we talked about how to get them. You need people to run this thing. So I'm really curious, where do workers and volunteers come from? So I'm going to start with Brian.
For me, I've been fortunate, as you know, I just have a certain way with some folks. I've just knocked on my friends' doors and just said, hey, can you help? And that's really where it started. And that was gaming friends, that was personal friends, family, and that's where you go to. You hope that there will be enough folks to establish that. And once that gets into a rotation year over year, then those folks start talking to their folks, and then it becomes a very communal domino effect, like, hey, I had a great time volunteering. I personally don't ask a ton, of hours. I mean, right now it's like 12, 14 hours of your time, and you got a free badge, you get a t-shirt, so by doing that, it's not that you're there to really work hard and press hard. I mean, you're there to help support the community show and have a good time and still have plenty of free time. So by offering that to people that want to volunteer their time helping out with the kids and the families and everything that comes along with the show, it's really establishing yourself first, planning yourself down and saying, okay, who can help out, who can be here to support the show, and have faith. They have faith in you, but they also have faith in themselves and what's going on around them and building that community. And, for myself, once again, it's leaning back. I pulled a lot of folks out of West Michigan Tabletop Gamers originally, and that was huge. It was a big catalyst to be able to establish that footprint.
Very,
Awesome.
very cool.
Let's move over to Mike.
Well, for me, it's a lot easier. I just go into my little bag of holding here, and I pull out.
People?
Little meeples. No,
can you send me one of those, Mike? Come on, man.
That's pretty handy.
I can have your name stitched on it too. No, so we are truly, both Brian's group and ours are truly blessed with all of the folks that we have to help us run this. And I want to get to the issue about how do you start something, but just to put things into perspective about how special it really is. I mean, we have on my staff of volunteers, we have 68 people. Every year we have over 350 GMs that run events, and we have about 60 volunteers who do things like badge checking or sitting in the registration area or walking the halls at night, checking, make sure people are safe, things like that. So it's amazing that and of course we give them free badges, and some people, they need that to be able to attend. And we love to be able to provide that for folks who may not be able to afford it right out of their pocket, and that's okay. But to start something, it could be a daunting task. And a lot of it has to do with where you live. Are you in a remote area? Are you in a metropolitan area? Are you someplace where people can get to easily by an airport or by car? These are all factors that affect not only people that help you run it, but people who actually attend.
Right.
So for us, when I did SpartaCon, since it was starting basically from nothing, just with the volunteers that were in the club, we actually beat feet, like Brian said, and we walked flyers to all the local game stores, to the mall, and we would stand at the mall entrance, just handing flyers out, leafleting, and being chased away by the security guards. Doing all we could do to get the word out. And our first year, we got 300 and something people, which I thought was fantastic for just doing it that way at a college convention. As you step it up, for people who want to start a convention in their community, first things first, call somebody like Brian or I to get as many bits of wisdom as you can get, because I'm always available. Someone could just hit me up on Facebook or in the email. I'll be happy to share all kinds of stories. You may not like them all, but I'll share them.
I'm going to ask about some of those, but
yeah, I'm
follow
sure.
up people if you're interested.
Sure. I'm sure. But yeah, just there are so many factors into what it takes to get one of these off the ground that I could talk a whole show about that stuff. But suffice to say, there is a formula you can use. It is scalable. And yeah, it's if you have the passion, like Brian and I do, you can do something like this wherever you are.
It's no small task. I will say that it's no small task.
So, is there a lot of crosstalk between con organizers and committees to like trade secret recipes and stuff?
No way, they're the enemy, man. Are you kidding?
You don't even compete. You should help each other.
Some, you run into that a little bit with some, but I mean that's the world we live in, right? But most folks are very amicable, very friendly, willing to share. Just as in the designer world, you talk about similar things, right? You talk about, hey, what about this mechanic, and what do you think of this? And so it's the same thing in Mike and our world. We discuss, like, have you thought about this? Have you looked at this? And the hard part, though, is that we're speaking from our world, what's immediately around us, and to really see what's happening from a demographic area, because every part of the country is different. People are different in every part of the country. I mean, that's a given. So you got to figure out what is your demographic, what are people like in your area, what attracts them, how can you, make them excited for what you have to offer, and to introduce them into the hobby industry. So that's where it's nice to be able to talk to somebody that's in a different part of the country and say, what are you doing? Maybe I'll try that, and vice versa. So you balance each other out by doing so.
So go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, as far as strength and capacity, I mean, there's a lot more designers and attendees than there are actual convention organizers, if you will. So that makes it a little more of a challenge, especially with the amount of work that we put on our shoulders and take on ourselves. So it makes it a challenge to get that communication across when we're spinning 1,000 plates.
Right. I do have a question from John Dubois, a Michigan native, who asks, Brian, I know that the first GrandCon or two were combined gaming and comics events. Did there end up being much crossover between the two? And then I'll just pin my little 2 cents on there, like, so why is it's still a comics and gaming thing?
To make that long story short, it didn't draw the comic side like was intended.
Okay.
We really gave it a hard push, and for whatever reason, I don't get it, because I read comics, and I play games, right?
I was going to say, I think everybody on here falls into that. So yeah, I could see why you might assume the demographic.
I'm looking right behind you, Erica, and I mean, hey.
My whole house looks like this, people, just so you know.
But, so that's why it was an attempt. It was an establishment, and for whatever reason at the time, I mean, the mindset back then, and we see it different now because we see comic shows really kind of reaching out and grabbing onto the gaming side,
right.
more so than ever. But back then, it was a tough challenge. Grand Rapids is a different area. It's very tight knit family, so it was a challenge. It was something we had to give it a try, and it just didn't work, and we saw more. I saw more potential with the gaming side of things, and it was predominantly gaming. I mean, if you took the 12, 13, 1,400 attendees that we saw over the first few years, you'd say, 1,100, 1,200 of those people were gamers, and 100 or 200 were there for the comics. And
interesting.
You know what I mean? So it was just at a point you got to say, you can only go so far before you're like, okay, I see where the focus is at. Let's push that side. And so that's why it became just GrandCon Gaming Convention. And, that's where I'm at today.
Right. Another couple questions. Jim Baker from Ottawa asks, Montreal. I think it's Montreal. What's something that you always thought a designer or publisher should do at your convention to gain attention and attract people, but have never seen done? I'll throw that one out to you, Mike. What have you seen, or what do you wish the publishers and designers would do?
What a great question, Jim. Thank you. So one of the things we're going to start doing this year, we're going to have our first annual publisher speed dating. Mm-hmm. And so what that does is it ties to the last question about, what is the value add to a publisher? Well, our publishers, those who would like to participate, will be able to speed date up-and-coming designers who have something to show them, and they will be given a private area. I think what we're going to do is close the dealer's hall and just set tables up in there, and they'll have an hour to set up their games, the designers, and then those publishers will go through and listen to those speed date pitches. It'd be like 7 minutes of pitch, 3 minutes of feedback, and then rotate. And what I hoped that the attendees who are participating can get out of that is that personal connection with those publishers, get some good advice, so that when they do hit the Kickstarter market or they get picked up, that they have that edge over somebody who doesn't take the time to go through that process. For my first game, before it came out, we worked that game for 2.5 years before it hit the market. And this is pre-Kickstarter, so we had no benefit there either. And we took a lot of advice from our players, and we added a lot of changes. And it was a totally different game from the first time I looked eyes on it to the time that we released it. It's that opportunity that I didn't really have from a professional to be able to talk face-to-face with them that we're hoping to do with that publisher speed dating.
Right. And Brian, what do you think?
I'm very, very much in the same mindset as Mike, and as I grow, those types of things will be afforded to me more so. For me, I'm still in my early years, if you will, of the convention, but those thoughts are there. And what I'm getting at is, like, I bolted on this past year. I had Unpub come in. They came in a couple years ago as well, and so I had an Unpub room, which was as best as we could handle and manage, is get those designers in there and then promote that to the publishers and other designers so they could crosstalk and feed off each other in that regard, help each other out, along with the publishers being aware of it. Having a speed dating event is I think, crucial to be able to do that, as long as you're able to find the right time. It can be very time consuming, so you got to make sure that you have it staffed properly and it's catered properly. So it's but yeah, it's definitely something that I want to do in the near future. But working as closely with the designers, making sure that they are aware of, don't be afraid to walk up to the publishers, especially at a show like mine. Mine's still, it's smaller, regional, but growing. So you still have an opportunity to be very intimate as far as being able to get in front of somebody and have a good, solid conversation with them, unlike the beast of Indianapolis. So, you actually have some breathing room, some elbow room, and you can actually think and put your thoughts together while discussing that and maybe turning into something wonderful that's a game coming out in the near future, whether it's Kickstarter or straight to publishing. But so I encourage that with the smaller. So you encourage that with the smaller regional shows like mine as mine grows. But try to get to those as close to you that are around you, and more if you can. If you can get out to a Kublacon, if you can get to GrandCon, things like that. Try to get to those shows. And because if there's a lot of industry folks there, which my show draws in a lot of industry people, I bring in a lot of designers. It's a really nice. I'm biased, but I think it's a very nice time. But it gives you that opportunity to have that intimate experience that you're probably going to miss when you hit, even Origins, Gen Con, PAXs, what have you. So that's kind of what I have to say as I grow my show. Love to have a speed dating. That's an awesome thing to have, because it gives you that opportunity to really practice that pitch too. That you need, which I'm sure any one of you could speak to that. The pitch is very vital.
We've had whole episodes on it.
Many
I
episodes.
will say, Brian makes a good point, because we do talk about how to get to know publishers. Not to say to decision makers will always be at, smaller cons, but definitely they will know the decision makers even if they're not. So it is really important and probably a good way to kind of get face-to-face time.
Yep.
So just
it'll be easier to scrap something together at a GrandCon than a GenCon, just like Brian said.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So do we have more questions online, or otherwise
we do have some more.
They just keep coming in.
They do. Zach is asking, have either of you reached out to local escape room companies to run events at your conventions? Mike, have you done that?
We haven't reached out to an escape room yet, but that was going to be one of my other points to build on one of the other questions, which was to increase the size and the increased attendance. We try to rely on other little miniature events to attract under our umbrella so that we can bolster our attendance. And one of the reasons why I went out to go visit GrandCon is because I was following, now full disclosure, I also work at Gen Con. I'm on the event staff. I've been doing it for the last 4 or 5 years. And even one of my bosses at Gen Con, who actually works for the LLC, wanted to come to Kublacon last year to see how we ran things, to see if he could glean any information and take it back.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so I did the same thing with GrandCon because I heard about all these really cool events that Brian had. And so, honestly, he introduced me to Roan Barton, who's now going to bring the Iron GM to Kubla next year because of that connection. So these are all the different little miniature events I'm talking about that gets the word out across the country because they have that pull and that draw. So that's what makes the conventions more homogenous, because they have these events that travel around and do it their thing at these different shows. And on the back end, you got companies who have software that helps run the show, and they're all over the place. So it does homogenize somewhat, all the conventions to some degree. And then you have the individual flavor of the convention based on its location that makes it what it's unique versus a different convention. But that's, yeah, I really enjoy that aspect of this puzzle making. That's fun.
And Brian, what about you? Have you reached out to local escape companies or other events?
Yes, I have. Actually, I have the Grand Rapids Great Escape Room that comes in. They right now are just booth pals, if you will. They come in and set up a booth, and they're advertising their business. But I'm working with them next year. Actually, we're talking about doing some more puzzle or escape room type of elements at the show. Working with the local manager now, and eventually having that crossover. The escape room for them is maybe a mile and a half, so it's within reasonable walking distance. And so folks could, I'm hoping to build in some sort of ticketing where they can buy the ticket at GrandCon, maybe hit a localized one at the show, or go to their actual venue and have some crossover there to help build that community, because that's important to me, to establish that community. You start doing that, and then that'll make a huge rippling effect as far as how things go and excitement and fun. But yes, I think it's a lot of fun. We love puzzles. And as we know, so
any convention runner loves puzzles. It's all one big puzzle,
right? That's a good point.
So yes.
Excellent. Before we go too further, I just wanted to say hi to everybody on the feed, because there's a lot of people. So
great.
Zach Connolly for all your good questions. Andrew Wolf out at USAopoly. JB Jones in Ottawa. Stefan Brunel in Quebec. Who else? We got Marshall Britt in Rhode Island. We got Travis Magrum in Ohio, who said he loves GrandCon and was so disappointed that his friend had to get married this weekend. We have Jean Dubois. Jean Dubois, who is very, very close. He's in the Detroit, Michigan area. We have Ming DT, who's in Atlanta. Hey, Tange Sarah's watching. Andrew Julia he's in Honduras right now. Niles Breacher in Wisconsin. Let's see who else is here. We've got Josh Githens. We've got all sorts of people watching. Robert Searing, Jade Duguay. Wow, Dave Tomei also in the New York area. Wow. Scott in London, down the road. Andrew Long in Arizona. There's all sorts of people watching today. So
I think San, you should You should go on the auditions for the new Romper Room. You did a great job there. I think that was fantastic.
It's pretty funny. So Erica and I are teachers, and
there you go.
You get good at saying names.
I bet.
Memorize I have 600 students, and I memorize their names. So
that's good. That's good.
I will admit to that I'm really good with first names, and I kind of suck at last names. I will fully admit to that.
Yeah. So, Jesse, are there any questions from your end? I know Kublacon's in your area.
Yeah. So, actually,
requests? Do you have any requests for Mike?
Do I have any requests? No, I don't have any requests. Schedule it on a weekend when I'm not out of the country next year.
There you go.
So, actually, so we've done a lot of talking about things that publishers and designers and convention runners can do to work together. And I was actually wondering if you have any suggestions for new designers or people that are trying to break into the industry that are going to their first convention. Is there anything they can do to help make your convention a better place that could also help them get a foothold in the industry? A lot of the advice and things we've talked about are applicable to people who've already got a name, who could draw crowds, or are otherwise relying on structures like the speed dating that you were talking about. But is there anything the individual could do? The budding designer with, big glowing eyes and aspirations and who's thinking about coming to your convention. What could they do to make it a more excellent convention that would also help them get into the industry? Do you have any suggestions or advice for those people?
Is that for me?
Sure, since you
ask. So I will say that first and foremost, if you are a up and coming designer and you have a couple of conventions targeted, you definitely want to reach out to the convention organizers to see what they might have available to you. For us, like I mentioned, we have the speed dating, but we also have a huge protospiel, which is kind of like the Unpub. So they can get their game into the protospiel to actually get a lot of people to come through there. And in fact, they keep a lot of statistics in that room. So they'll be able to tell that person, how many people came through their table. They'll help them get feedback, help them talk through things that might be challenging for them with their game. And these are industry. Luke Laurie is the one who's going to be running our protospiel. So he knows a lot about games. He's been making them for quite some time. So he'll be there to help guide these people who want to do this. And then ever since the inception of Kublacon, we've had a design contest, a board game design contest, where people can bring in or send in their prototypes. They get play tested by a core group of people off season to whittle them down to those that can actually function in the convention environment. And then they are let loose to play out of our game library. And we have people take notes and put things in the notes and give them back, and then they are graded and voted upon, and we have an award ceremony at the end. So that's another avenue where somebody could get their game in the hands of potential. See, in the old days, it was getting in the hands of someone who worked at Gamma, because that was one of our members was a Gamma executive. But now it's to get it in the hands of the consumer who will be on Kickstarter at some point in time. So really pressing the flesh with those designers, and as a designer with the attendees and with the publishers, it becomes a real nexus and a real synergy for what everybody has and wants out of a game convention.
Excellent. So I just want to ask this question. Tange says, how do we infuse a healthy component to convention? Group walks, healthy food? What do you think? What do you think, Brian? Is there anything at GrandCon that is healthy?
Yes, the people.
Unless you're Erica and you got
But I get where this is coming from. How many cons have you been to where you never left the building?
Right. So it's making sure that there are, Perel stations, encouraging people to, wash their hands in some form or fashion. I'm not there to be their parent. I'm not going to tell you what to do, and I don't expect anybody else to say the same, but I think just encouraging each other, fist bumps and elbow bumps and things like that, because things do fly and float around at the conventions. Getting up and stretching, going for walks, things like that, making sure you stay hydrated, make sure you get enough sleep, make sure that you are eating. I know several of my friends, they'll game for 12 to 14 hours and then they'll be like, oh, I should probably go eat. Just make sure that you're keeping yourself fueled and maintained, and always be smiling. Always be smiling. That's kind of it starts here, works down to here. So that's how I say to stay healthy. Everything else should be common sense, but sometimes we do have to enlighten some.
Well, short of actually having a 5 a.m. Morning dip in the bay, which we could do because you could swim in the bay because it's right across the street from Kubla. But short of doing that, we were a little more clever in trying to trick our attendees into fitness. Because of our massive growth over the last several years, we've now expanded into 3 hotels that are within walking distance. So we just strategically place events in the different hotels so that somebody that really wants to go be part of an event might have to walk there. We do offer a bus for those who are lugging their stuff, especially the miniature wargamers with all those minis. We're also going to be probably trying out a service that has the little scooters, the motorized scooters, where you can just tag off and tag on those things. To get people out in the fresh air and going between the two venues or 3 venues, they can use those scooters, which is just another way to get people to go do stuff like that. And then because the kids are in the kids' room pent up for so long, we want to get them out and stretching. Our mascot, Kubla himself, the mighty Kubla, takes them on a tour de force of the entire convention floor, and they yell Kubla, and everybody else yells Kubla. And the kids get dressed up in plastic swords and shields and helmets, and they go marching through the whole place 2 or 3 times during the weekend. So it gets a little bit exercise. Their parents are following in tow to make sure that they stay in line, literally, not figuratively. And so, yeah, it's kind of a way to trick people into doing a little bit extra. Aside from which, most of our local cons here do have a little guide in the book that says, bathe, use soap, that kind of stuff. It sounds really silly, but sometimes it has to be said. And then we do also have the Purell stations that are all battery operated, and we put them all over the hotel. We tell people to drink plenty of water, and we do have 2 people on staff, I believe, that are first aid certified. So in case somebody has an issue, we have some element of safety there.
Okay.
Yeah, with what Mike said too, at GrandCon for the past few years, I've had what's called a boffer arena. If you're not familiar with that term, the kids can get in this, sectioned off area. Yeah, they got the foam bats or swords with the shields. So for the kids, it's fun. I haven't seen too many adults get in there. I don't know what would happen if that.
They tried to get me to get in there several times. I walk by, they're like, "Do you want to try it? Do you want to try that?" And I look at this kid about this tall. I'm like, you'll probably beat me.
I don't know what will happen. Right? Yeah. So there are ways for, especially for the kids. I've definitely been working on an avenue because obviously kids have a lot of energy, right? And so it's nice for them to be able to burn some of that off while at the show, and then go back and hang out with mom, dad, uncle, aunt, whatever, and have some fun playing games. And that is a nice element that I have. And of course, downtown Grand Rapids is a beautiful location. If you haven't had an opportunity to be there, I'll see you next year. So with that though, there's a lot of great places to walk to, within a really reasonable walking distance. Like I mentioned, the Great Escape room is a mile and a half away. So if I start doing those crossovers like that, then people are more encouraged to take a little bit of a walk that way too.
And Brian, you tricked us too. You told us you had reservations at the Founders, and we had to walk quite some ways to get there. So it was rewarding, but yes, walking was lovely.
7-8 minute walk,
Grand Rapids was actually no, it wasn't. I was tired.
We do have a strange question. We have a strange question here.
Strange.
It's from Inari O'Meara. And he asks, Mike, why the vests?
So, truth be told, Inari is one of my staff members.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah. So what Kublacon uses to identify its staff members are maroon vests that have our logo on one of the breast sides. And some people actually had their name stitched on the other side. Having a way to easily and quickly identify staff members is super important. And both from a, hey, I have a question, to a, oh my gosh, I have an emergency, I need your help. So we definitely want to make sure that we stand out in some unique way. And since Walmart had blue, we went with maroon vests. I mean, that's,
not Walmart.
Got to differentiate.
Anti-Walmart, yeah.
Hey, I wanted to circle back real quick on something that before I forget. Obviously, there's so much we could say, but something for designers too that are up and coming, getting in and getting into the industry and knowing people in the industry. Something that I've seen over the past few years, I've had a few people come in that they volunteer at the show. And I'm not saying that to be by any means like come volunteer, but that is a way to, kind of step in, get to know people, talk to the designers, maybe even talk to the publishers while they're out roaming, doing their floating positions or whatever, and it gets them more acclimated and definitely softer approaches, if you will, because they get to know people a little bit, and it helps break that ice for them, especially if somebody's nervous or apprehensive or a little bit internalized. So that's another opportunity. It isn't something that
it's a great opportunity.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful, wonderful one. We have another question. Look, Zach Connolly coming up with all the questions. He says or asks, how do you, if at all, police your open play areas to keep indie publishers from setting up camp for free?
Interesting one.
I don't know. Zach,
so, Brian, go ahead and go with that one.
I'm sorry, what?
Uh-oh.
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I get it. That was
we
good.
Lost your voice there.
That was good.
So, yeah, personally, there's no selling allowed on the floor. If they're coming in and they're indie and they're small, hey, I'm there to help where I can. Now, if it starts to impose on other publishers or create some sort of a rift or a problem, we'll have a discussion. We'll figure out the right solution. But someone that's coming in that's just starting in the industry, I have no quorums. I have no problems with somebody that wants to set up a little bit and play some games and show off their potential goods. But if it becomes, like I said, I have strict rules that you cannot sell on the floor, you cannot put up signs on the floor. To me, it's still open gaming, and that's what they're doing, and they're encouraging the hobby industry, and hopefully it benefits them. And they're gonna, without sounding selfish, because that's not my point here, but they'll remember that, right? They'll remember that, and I think karma, what comes around goes around. I fully believe in that. So, you be kind to others, they'll be kind to you. That's how it goes. And if they're not, well, I don't need any negativity in my life. So,
yeah, Brian, that's a great question, Zach. So for us, same rules. As long as you're not selling, we're not there to make money off of small press folks who have a prototype or a game that they're trying to get the word out. It's open gaming for a reason. As long as it's an open gaming table and doesn't have a reserve sign or a future reserve sign, and you wind up camping over that reservation, then it's fine. But we do have a place in our dealer's hall for people who have things that are ready to go to Kickstarter or who just launched a Kickstarter, and we do want them to be in the exhibit hall and have a booth so that they can take orders and show it off in a more controlled and meaningful way. So we have, and then like anything else, if you want to prevent something from happening, make sure you have a place where it can be done in a organized way.
And so interject there, sorry, Mike, but
go ahead.
I just want to dovetail on that. I think that's a good point, because that's the next step, right? You come in first, you might have just something that's just drawing cards and paper, and you're playing with people and having a good time. The next step, if you're ready to go to Kickstarter, you're ready to publish it. Yeah, what Mike was saying, exactly. You want to get a table, a booth, or somewhere set up so you can establish yourself and start pre-selling, because that's how you're going to do it. But yeah, so anyway, I go ahead, Mike. That's a great point you bring up.
Yeah. I was just going to round it off with the whole idea that, if you have a problem with something, create a place so it can be done in a controlled way. So that's why we have the Protospiel, and that's why we have open gaming space, and that's why we have Kickstarter spaces, so that anybody and everybody who's got a game in one phase or another has a place that they can feel comfortable demonstrating.
That's really nice. In behavioral psychology, we call that a replacement behavior.
There you go.
So we give them an option, an out, instead of just hammering them with punishment, right?
I was Sigmund Freud and didn't even know it.
There you go. Well, he's a psychodynamic theorist, but
I was going to say he did do a lot of conditioning, but that's okay.
Okay, well, I'm Pavlov, and I've got lots of dogs. Then I don't know how.
There you go.
That's
That's how the reference works.
that's you're getting closer.
You're in the right field now.
Yes, now you're in the right field.
It's warmer, but you should still take Sense intro class.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, so we're getting towards the end of the show, so I thought this would be a great chance to kind of share those either funny or horror stories that you can now share in hindsight. I'm sure they were really bad at the time, but something, I don't know if they're words of warning or just, oh my God, I can't believe this happened, but you've got to have some sort of fun stories by now. So I'm seeing Mike is already like, yeah, I know the story. He's like, which one to pick?
Exactly. I'm trying to think, okay, well, which one's going to make us still look like a great convention to go visit?
Hey, it's words of warning, too.
Yes,
right?
it is. So the worst thing, well, there are lots of bad things, but one of the worst things that can happen to a game convention is that their hotel undergoes a renovation. So, like with all bureaucracies, they can tell you, oh yeah, we're going to start the day after your con, and we promise in 364 days we'll be done. Well, guess what? No, they were not. So in 2016, we had a humongous problem with our hotel in that they were not done. They had to close off the entire 9th floor, which were several of our sleeping rooms, plus some gaming areas. 1/4 of the 2nd floor was closed. The entire bar that used to be inside the restaurant was closed. And the atrium, which is what our marquee space, the space that everybody loves and knows Kublacon for, was closed. And a lot of that came as a surprise, and some of it even after our book went to press. So you do have these curveballs that can be thrown at you. But I will say this, that if it wasn't for the fact that that was our 16th year, it could have buried us. But because we've been doing it for so long, and we had such a tremendously talented staff, that they rolled with that punch pretty well. And it to us, it was a lot of hecticness, but to the attendees, they saw, even though they complained a lot, they saw a lot less of what we saw because of how we handled it.
That's awesome.
You got any good ones, Brian? It can be funny, too. It doesn't just have to be horror stories.
A couple that come to mind. Yeah, very similar situation, not at that level, but when you have guests that you've acquired rooms for and taken the opportunity to welcome them in. Maybe it's their first year to your show or what have you, and then you get them giving you a call directly saying, "Hey, I'm at the front desk and I don't have a room." And you're like, well, that should not be. So, things like that will happen, especially in the hotel accommodation side of life. And generally, you can resolve it. And it's just with being calm and patient and just knowing that, the person at the other end of the line, being the hotel representative or what have you, may not have been their fault or whatever, but they'll get it resolved. And that actually happened to a guest of mine this year, and it was resolved quickly and efficiently, and they were all happy and said and done. But, those kind of things are like, for me, I'm just like, oh my gosh, because I want that person to be happy when they come in. But what do you do when you're like, you booked a room, you have it set, and then all of a sudden, boom, somebody calls you and says, we don't have this person booked. And you're like, Okay, so you just resolve it. That was a situation that it got taken care of quickly and efficiently. The other is when you have a library and you're building a library and you have volunteers to help. And right now I'm up to over 1,300 titles, and some of these racks can get rather heavy. So it's very grateful that you have volunteers that are able to help out in that manner and tote them around. And but as you know, with these games, the games can get pretty heavy sitting on racks. So there's been a moment when a good friend of mine, who fortunately has a set of good, strong arms and a strong back, but when you hear somebody going, "Help!" and you're like, "What's going on?" And you're like, "Help!" and and you run back, and all of a sudden you get closer, and the help's getting louder, and here's your volunteer buddy standing there, and 2 wheels had fallen off a rack, and 3 are leaning against it, and he's holding up all this weight because he doesn't want to hurt the games. So that's and we're just dive right in and get it taken care of. But those kind of things do happen, and we all had a good chuckle about it, and at the same time, like, oh man, thank you. But I would have just I said, you could have just let them. He's like, no, it's your library, man. So it's that kind of thing has occurred over the years. But for the most part, it's the good times are watching the kids laugh, the people come together and laugh, good spirits. I mean, those are the great times. Those are the fun stories, and there's so many of those. It's hard to unwind those and talk about them all because we've all had them. But yeah, you have those little moments at conventions, and you cherish them, and you remember them, and you work from them, and you get through them. You just have to have sometimes the patience of a saint, as they'll say. But it's just one step at a time, and it'll all come together.
Yeah, cool. Very, very cool. One quick question, last question for me. Do you have a code of conduct?
Yes.
Those are my questions, too.
Yep.
Both?
We have a code of conduct and a harassment policy, both found on our website.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Same here.
Perfect.
Yep.
Good.
And it evolves. It evolves over time, just like everything else.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. All right, Jess, I think that's probably about the time, right? We're over because we were late. And Jess, you're muted, buddy. No wonder why you haven't asked so many questions.
Sorry. Yes, we're over. We started late, and so we went an extra 7 minutes additionally to compensate. So
yes. That's how time works.
That's right. That's exactly how time works. 5 minutes late, stay 10 minutes after.
Timey-wimey.
Wibbly wobbly.
Yeah, wibbly wobbly.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
So on that note, I think this brings us to the end. Thank you, Brian and Mike, for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Been our pleasure to have you. Erica and Sen, of course, you're both fantastic. The show couldn't happen without you. Apologies to everybody for the tech hang-ups, but we got ourselves up and running.
And we didn't have a crash.
We didn't have a crash. Yeah, that's right. Turns out a good old Windows restart even works on a Mac. Thanks everybody for tuning in. This week isn't over yet. We still have the rest of this week. We have Pro Tip tomorrow, which we will fashion. I apologize for not getting a question up yesterday, but maybe I'll do something over the weekend to make up for it.
I did a question.
Oh, good. Great. I didn't see it. It's been a busy week for me. And on Friday, we're going to have John Bridger on to talk about playtesting. And so
ethnographic playtesting
and
studies.
His, sort of what I think is a unique approach to that. And next week, we are doing a design spotlight. Is that correct, Sen?
Yeah.
Next Wednesday, we'll have our first designer spotlight, so that's exciting. It'll be 3-on-1, the Meeple Syrup crew, and a new and up-and-coming designer. Who's on, Sen?
It's the guy who did Bees Lives. Bees Lives.
That's right. Well, if you want, we'll make a puzzle hunt for our guests. If you want to find out who our guest is next week, check out Bees Lives, which I think is on Kickstarter right now, and come back next week and let us know who our guest is so that we can introduce
them. We're introducing.
And
let
then
no rock be unturned.
Yeah, the Bee Lives or Bee Lives. We will only know summer. It's Matt Shoemaker.
Yeah.
He is a librarian educator, and he'll be on the show. One other thing is the week after that, we are going to have the Finches from Brisbane, Australia. They're game designers and UX designers. And so we're going to talk about how UX is an overlooked thing in game design and product design. And we're going to see what we can learn from them and mine their expertise to just make better games for everybody to play. And that's, I think, what's on tap.
Yeah, that's good enough for now. All right. So again, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for everybody for being here. This video will be up by the end of my night tonight. And if you want to share it with your friends, yes, En? You had a finger.
Where can we reach everybody?
Where can we reach everybody? Good question.
Brian, where can we reach you if we need to reach you? On Twitter, on Facebook, what?
Yes, any and all of those. The easiest way would be info@grand-con.com. You could definitely find me the quickest there, and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. I'm not opposed to speaking to you over the phone if I have the opportunity or time, and I'll definitely meet you in person at any show, including GrandCon next year. So.
Yep, you can reach us through Facebook. I'm pretty responsive on the PM there, and also at, me personally, at mike@kublacon.com. But if you have a registration question, it'd be registration@kublacon.com.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
and on
guys.
that note, I think Jesse's going to dance a little.
Impromptu dancing.
Again.
You're muted, buddy.